We now come to the fourth group, after Clause 27, Amendment 58. Lord Hampton.
My Lords, I rise to move my amendments 58, 59 and 60, and would like to thank Baroness Jones of Moulscombe and Baroness Pigeon for the help along the way. My Lords, I originally degrouped these from the original groupings as they were more about safety than accessibility and inclusivity, and I thought actually they were important enough that they might get a bit lost in the other group. Bus drivers marched on the 29th of January from Victoria to Parliament to protest about driver conditions and to present a petition signed by over 29,000 people calling for the acceptance of the Bus Drivers' Bill of Rights, which is about giving bus drivers the basic rights of employment that they feel that are being eroded. And it was timed to commemorate the death of Kathleen Finnegan, who was killed by a London bus whilst crossing on Victoria's station. Driver welfare is the cornerstone of any legislation. I've had meetings with the reps of bus driver groups who really feel that there are some working practices going on that they are unhappy about, and my Amendment 58 is mandating that everyone has access to a confidential incident reporting system, of which CIRAS is one of them. There are several bona fide reporting systems available, and TfL has had this in place since February 2016, and once again I think we're going back to the fact that TfL does a very good job. Let's roll this out. In my conversations with the Minister, and I thank him very much for them, that actually he felt that this could be brought in and that this would help a lot about driver safety and concerns. If this is a requirement for every bus company, that you would hope that this would mean that any driver safety issues could be thoroughly investigated, which again is great for transparency and confidence for passengers, workers and politicians. On Amendment 59, on the first day of committee, the Noble Lord the Minister said that this bill is about safety. Lord Snape referred to that as well, talking about passenger surveys. But actually, except for a section about how to deal with crime on buses, there's actually very little in this bill about safety. And my amendment here is to force bus companies to publish its safety data regularly. I talked about this at length in second reading, and I'm not going to repeat myself. But in the Minister's reply, he said that all the data nationwide is already available on Stats 19, and I'm afraid I'm going to ask the Noble Lords to buckle in and follow me closely on this one, because it's going to get quite granular. In the Minister's letter, he said it should also be noted that Stats 19 data is a comprehensive and robust public record of personal injury incidents and includes a wide range of data that can be used to support further improvements to safety. A further set of safety data is collected by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Authority, who also collect data on incidents or collisions involving public service vehicle licence holders. By law, all PSV operators must report fatalities, serious injuries, allegations of safety defect, serious damage as a result of incident, a safety critical component failure, or history of the same component failure in catching fire, unquote. I had to say, on a quite brief look, I didn't find Stats 19 either user-friendly, nor did it seem to regionalise data. In response, the very excellent Tom Kearney of London Bus Watch, and if there's anyone you need to granularly look at but data, it is Tom Kearney. And I quote him exactly. Compared to London's published data, the DfT's Stats 19 data is seriously deficient and undercounts the number of people killed and injured in bus safety incidents. Even a casual review of Stats 19 data will reveal that it is neither published as frequently nor in as much useful granular detail as the bus safety data. TfL has published on its website every quarter since 2014. Because Stats 19 data combines incidents involving buses and coaches and does not include injury incidents involving buses that have taken place on private roads or land, in brackets, entrances, exits to and at bus stations. As far as bus casualty data reporting is concerned, Stats 19 is both inaccurate and misleading. Stats 19 also does not include injury incidents, trips and falls on board buses that might have not have been caused by a collision, yet produce a lot of casualties, including fatalities, and are an important indicator of bus safety performance. An analysis of TfL's published data reveals that for a year period, 1st of June 2016 to 31st December 2023, collisions from London buses at bus stations have injured 133 and sent 87 people to hospital. In addition, since the 1st of January 2014 to the 31st of January 2024, 6 people have been killed from collisions from London buses at bus stations. None of these fatal or injury incidents involving buses are recorded in Stats 19 data. Out of the 120 preventable bus safety deaths that have occurred over the period Q1 2014 to Q2 2024 that TfL's published, 27 don't get reported in Stats 19 because they occurred at bus stations or resulted from onboard falls or other preventable safety incidents, the TfL, which doesn't provide any details. We have also FOI requests that provide that DVSA collects but does not publish data, and the Traffic Commissioner neither collects nor publishes data. End quote. My Lords, if you follow this issue is at best muddy. Could we as the users have this, say, on a dashboard divided by LTA? Stats 19 is neither easy to use nor, as far as I can see, divided across the regions. The Minister said that this might well be possible for franchises, but was doubtful whether this would work where there was not a franchise in place. Now, my Lords, these days we are being told that data is gold, and surely companies should be mining this data anyway to analyse their performance, and if not, why not? When I spoke to Go Ahead, they were also concerned that much of the accident data is no fault to buses, but might be used as a headline number to dent passenger confidence. But I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of mankind to separate fault and no fault accident data and learn from it. Again, my Lords, we are talking transparency and public confidence. On my Amendment 60, again, with my conversations with bus drivers, they are really concerned about tiredness, shift patterns, things changing, and feel that actually that they need more time. Now, in a conversation with the Minister, I realised that there are very different patterns about being an HGV driver, about being a bus driver. But I think this is more an amendment to push for an idea of the reporting and the idea we really need to look at driver welfare. And this, I beg leave to move.
Proposed, after clause 27, insert the following new clause and insert the words as printed in the Marshall list.
Lord Hampton's amendments have raised some really, really important points about the safety of bus services and are important for our considerations. Bus safety performance data being shared in a clear, simple, transparent way is important if we're about driving up performance, and the complexities we've heard outlined very clearly show why this is important. But I'm particularly interested in Amendment 58, as I think it's a good suggestion that all bus drivers should have access to the confidential incident reporting and analysis system known as CIRAS. You know, over my years working on the London Assembly, we heard evidence time and time again from drivers suffering from fatigue and stress, and in some places there being a culture which really did not support reporting of concerns and practices. Many drivers feared for their jobs, and we heard similar things about the tram network as well. When you look at the CIRAS website, it states in its role, we listen to the health and safety concerns of people in transport. We protect their identity when we share their concerns with the right people to act. When we listen, we learn. We help our members share good practice and promote an even stronger culture of listening. And our members learn from valuable safety information they might otherwise have missed. I think this is important as we seek to improve bus services across the country, and I really look forward to hearing the Minister's thoughts on this group of amendments, and particularly the point around CIRAS.
My Lords, the noble Lord Hampton has opened up with his amendments one of the most important and least discussed areas to do with bus operations in a way that actually presents many of us who have experience of responsibility one way or another, in my case a non-executive responsibility for a number of years for bus services, presents us with real challenges and difficulty, because the question we have to ask ourselves, I think, is whether the bus operators have the right mentality about safety. Now, I say that in the light of what's been achieved in the construction industry, for example, over the last 20 years, where a focus on zero accidents, zero injuries, has transformed the way of working. Of course, zero is never quite achieved, but very close to zero is now achieved on construction sites. But it's been a deliberate program and deliberate change in mentality that has brought that about. I think on the railways there is a strong focus on mentality, on that mentality. And I wonder if it exists in the buses. Are we, in fact, way out of date in our attitudes towards safety? I want to mention the fact that I've just become an officer of the newly reconstituted APPG on women in transport. And I want to mention it because of the relevance it has, is that many of these issues to do with safety are actually women's issues. There's the obvious question of violence against women and girls on buses, and the APPG is going to look at that. But there's the broader issue of safety in general. I don't have an up-to-date statistic, but it used to be the case quite a long, admittedly some years ago, that a very large percentage of women over the age of 65 presenting at A&E were there because they had suffered an injury inside a bus. Inside a bus, not a bus collision, but inside a bus. Because, very often, because of aggressive or inappropriate braking. On modern buses that, of course, have very sharp brakes, the safety regulators, of course, think, yes, we must have the sharpest and most modern brakes, just as you do on a motor car. But in a motor car, you're sitting down and strapped in. And on a bus, you're very frequently standing up, because buses are designed to carry standing passengers. And sharp braking results in people falling over. And very often, proportionally, that is elderly women who are falling over and are being injured. Do we take proper account of that? Are we recording it? Are we thinking actively about what we should do about it? The situation has not improved in the 20 years or so. I've been making this point about women, elderly women, inside buses. And then there is the question of the way, and this is very pertinent to this bill, the way in which franchise contracts operate. Now, my experience is somewhat out of date, but it is a London-based experience where franchising is used, and it is the London model which is, the basis for this bill to some extent. It is being rolled out elsewhere. But the emphasis in the contracts is on the timeliness, on keeping to the timetable. And that is very difficult in urban areas because of congestion and unpredictable events, including roadworks and so forth. So very often drivers are under pressure and have a clock. They're in direct communication, of course, with their control. They're under pressure to make up time because gaps in the service have arisen. And they can only do that by going faster and braking sharper. And quite apart from the effects which I've already mentioned on passengers, potential effects on passengers inside the bus, of course, the risk of actually knocking into something, and often with very, very serious effect, if that something happens to be a live human body walking in the street, the likelihood of knocking into something is increased. And so we're all here saying how wonderful, we're not all of us saying it with the same level of enthusiasm, admittedly, but there are people in the room saying how wonderful it is that we're extending for a franchise model, but the structure of the contract on which those franchise is going to be based need to be looked at very carefully in the light of safety considerations. And I think we should all be very grateful to the noble Lord Hampton, for bringing this issue up. I'm not myself persuaded in relation to Amendment 60 that we should have a new and separate statutory provision about working time in this Act when we already have quite extensive and elaborate working time legislation elsewhere. But on amendments, is it 58 and 59, the first of his two amendments, there is a lot to be said in their favour, and I have a suspicion that they will reappear on report, and if they do, then I think they will deserve very serious consideration indeed.
Mm-hmm.
I thank the noble Lord Hampton and the noble Baronesses, Baroness Jones of Mousel-Combe and the noble Baroness Pigeon for Amendment 58. This seeks to require local authorities to ensure that bus operators are providing their drivers with access to the confidential incident reporting and analysis system, which I'll refer to as CIRAS. My Lords, the government, as it should be, is always concerned about any safety incidents in the bus or indeed in any other public transport sector. That's why a number of official routes exist to allow anyone to provide confidential, anonymous reporting on safety and standards in the sector, and backed up by enforcement. Anyone may anonymously report a lack of safety or confirmation to standards in the bus sector to the DVSA intelligence unit, which may use this information to investigate the situation, including working with other government departments and agencies, as well as police forces. There are comprehensive standards that bridge all aspects of bus operation across roadworthiness of vehicles, operation of services and driver standards. And as I've said, they're enforced by a number of organisations, but principally DVSA. The operators of the vehicles are licensed by the traffic commissioners, who consider seriously non-compliance issues and ensure operators are effectively regulated. The judicial process of the traffic commissioners can and does result in depriving people of operators' licences and also depriving managers of their certificate to run bus operations. In terms of CIRAS, this does provide another route for employees to report concerns. Both Transport for London and Transport for Greater Manchester are members of CIRAS. And being able to report such concerns in a confidential manner is clearly important, and I would encourage employees of member organisations to consider using this service where appropriate. But CIRAS is a third-party service, and it wouldn't be appropriate to include them within scope of this bill. However, what I will say, because I did a bit of personal research on this, is that if we're asking people to go to the DVSA to report bus safety issues to the DVSA intelligence unit, then it would make a lot of sense for that access to the intelligence unit to be freely available. And when I looked at it myself, it was quite difficult to find, and I think that's really unhelpful. So I commit this afternoon that we will go away and see what needs to be done to make sure that the route to report directly to the government agency responsible for safety on buses is as efficient and easy as possible. On Amendment 59, I thank the Noble Lord Hampton and the Noble Baroness Jones of Moulsecoombe for bringing it forward. Road safety is, of course, a priority for government, and we do expect bus operators, as I hope I've just said, to adhere to the highest standards of safety. Buses are one of the safest modes of road transport in Great Britain, and my department remains committed to improving safety with appropriate vehicle construction standards and ensuring the safe operation of vehicles. As we've heard, franchising authorities do report safety in detail, and I expect that the consequence of this bill, as it enables other franchising authorities to be established, will also enable them to report safety in the way, or a similar way to the way that London and Manchester already do so, because in effect the franchising authority is taking responsibility for procuring and delivering a bus service. In respect of operations which are not part of a franchise bus services, we've heard this afternoon that this is carried out through the Stats 19 framework, which relies on reports from the police. These reports are based on locations which are identified by geographical coordinates, and I think this is a role which can't be delegated to local transport authorities, and ought to stay with the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency because it relates to PSV operator licensing requirements. I note, however, the remarks of the Noble Lord Hampton, both in respect of the accidents away from public roads, which I will go away and have a very close look at. I'm not familiar with that particular nuance, but it's clearly an important one. What I would say to him is that I think trying to divide any sorts of accidents into fault and no fault is fraught with difficulty, and in fact it must be subjective, and therefore I'm not sure that we would want to go down that road. But I do understand his point about recording accidents on public service vehicles wherever they occur, and we will go away and I will go away and see what can be done about that. Turning to Amendment 60 from the Noble Lord Hampton, which seeks to change long-established rules about daily driving time on regular bus services. There are two sorts of driving time rules: one for services that don't go beyond 50 kilometres, and one services that do. These daily limits are well and long established, and I think the gist of certainly my conversation with the Noble Lord when we had it was that actually what he was looking for is the ability for people to report scheduling requirements on bus drivers that make drivers feel that they're not safe. Now, I would say that is a matter that could well be drawn to the attention of the DVSA, because it goes to the heart of the repute of the operator, and I can well understand that there may well be drivers who feel that what they're being asked to do is potentially or actually unsafe, and I think that therefore goes back to the process that that I've referred to about the ability to report it either to CIRAS if the people responsible for the operation are members of it, or the DVSA if they're not. And I note what he says about seeking that this amendment seeks to draw to our attention this important matter. I note that he and the Noble Lord Moylan talked about the timetable, and what I would say to that is that there should be no bus timetable in Britain that has any requirement for people to drive unsafely or exceed the speed limit. What I'd also say to him, as a seasoned operator with some background in it, is that very often, certainly in urban areas, in fact what you're looking for is not the timetable to be operated, but the reliability and of the bus service to be as good as it can be. And I think my experience is that actually drivers should not feel under pressure to resort to the timetable. In many cases, any substantial delay makes that impossible, but that the training given to bus drivers is about driving safely, about having absolute regard to the safety of passengers, and actually, furthermore, in practice, to maintain the regularity of the service rather than the timetable. But I'd say about all of that if there are cases where drivers feel that they are being asked to, either by schedule or in practice, to drive unsafely, then I think it's the reporting mechanism that we need to address, because actually there are people who are trained in this stuff who can address those issues.
With the Noble Lord's permission, I don't think we're disagreeing, and I don't think, therefore, that what he just said about timetables is quite the answer to my point, because it may be my fault for expressing it in the way I did. I said, I'm sure I did say, I'll look back, I talked about adhering to the timetable, but he's cast it differently. He said it is the reliability, that is the frequency between buses arriving, that is what operators seek to maintain. But it is precisely that which can lead to the sort of pressure on drivers from a controller to say, hurry up, because the gap between you and the bus ahead has got too large. And that is really what I was talking about and what I meant to express, though I used the language of timetabling. The key question which the Noble Lord will need to address is to what extent the contract rewards that behaviour. So to what extent is reliability rewarded in the contract? Because companies and people behave according to financial incentives in many cases. And if your quite narrow margins as a bus operator or on a franchise depend on maintaining certain levels of reliability, certain gaps between buses along the service, then that is what you'll be driving your staff and pushing your staff to do. So it does come back to this question of what the contract says and what it rewards.
I thank the Noble Lord for his intervention. I've spent most of my adult life before I got to the railway trying to encourage the people who control bus services not to rely on the timetable, but to adhere to a regular frequency. But I take his point, and I think that in fact, of course, the truth is in most urban areas that once you've lost time, the chances of ever regaining it are frankly pretty small. And with the increasing increasing speed limits of 20 miles an hour, even less. I take his point, but I also think that actually in the end this is about what people either believing or being actually required to drive unsafely is all about. And it's certainly possible, and I've seen it done to encourage people to attempt to make time up. But in my experience over the 50 years I've been driving buses, now and again more recently, it's really very difficult to do so. But let's go back to the safety aspect of it. I think where the Noble Lord Hampton is going rightly is to find a way for bus drivers to express that they're either being expected to drive unsafely or encouraged to do it. And I take his point very clearly about that. So what I said before about both the requirement or all of the requirement on franchised authorities who will report about safety because they're procuring the service, the availability of CIRAS where people have chosen to join that third-party organisation, but where they haven't, making the route to complaining more clearly available. I'm very much hoping answers the Noble Lord's points, and I will leave it there.
Thank all Noble Lords who took part in this debate, and I have to say I just generally thought this was this place at its best, and I realise that I've trespassed on a landscape of real expertise, but I think we got some cross-party consensus that we really need to push safety to the front of the bill if it's not there already. And I think the implication was there, but actually it's not on the bill. And it's very interesting, Lord Moylan's talk about the zero injuries in the construction industry, and I think we need to take that on board. And once again, we've got really back to, we need a really good reporting mechanism that people can use, and we need to publish what data is coming out as well as much as possible. And I trust the Noble Minister when he says he will actually go away and think about this a lot. So in that case, I beg leave to withdraw my motion.
Is it your Lordship's pleasure this amendment be withdrawn? Amendment is by leave withdrawn. Amendment 59, Lord Hampton, not moved. Amendment 60, Lord Hampton, not moved. Amendment 61, Lord Hampton, not moved. Amendment 60.